Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are continuing to look at the plagues, but we're not quite at the plagues yet. We're just going to set them up for a little bit until we get to the plagues. But in setting that up, we come to Exodus chapter 4. We're going to be in chapter 4, verses 1 through 17 today. And one of the big things that I want to walk through today is just this really interesting just kind of exchange that we have with God when he calls us to something or asks us or tells us really tells us to do something. When that happens, we you would think we should just go, oh yep, absolutely, I'll do it. A lot of the times though, we kind of come up with excuses for why I don't know if right now is the right time, I don't know if I'm the right person to do this. And Moses kind of goes that second route. He doesn't really think that he is really qualified to do what God has asked or told told of him to do. So we're going to look at that and see how God responds to all these excuses that Moses throws at the Lord. And so we're going to look at that today. So let's start in Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. Then Moses answered, "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you." So going back to Exodus chapter 3, God gives the command to Moses to go back to Egypt to deliver his people Israel from Egypt. But he also tells Moses how to describe him, that he is who he is, or as the scripture says in Exodus chapter 3, I am who I am. However, Moses goes, well, okay, I hear you, but what if they're like, you just made that up? It's a valid point, and it's valid observation on Moses's part, but it starts this kind of train of he's going to kind of come up with things to hopefully not have to be the one that has to do this work that God has told him to do. And again, I feel like I've been in that situation as well. And so for me to go, oh, that was wrong of Moses, I can't really say that, right? And so, but let's see God's response though. Verse 2. The Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" And he said, "His staff." And he said, being God, "Throw it on the ground." So Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, Put out your hand and catch it by the tail." So he put out his hand and caught it, and became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. All right, so this first sign that God gives to Moses has to do with his staff, but also a serpent. And I think there's a couple things with this here. First off, it's interesting just to see Moses' reaction in verse 3 upon seeing his staff turning into a serpent. He runs away from it, or he backs up from it very dramatically. Understood. Physically, not everybody's a fan of snakes. I don't mind them personally, but not everybody's a fan of them. Spiritually, your staff literally just turned into a serpent. That doesn't happen. And then biblically, though, I almost wonder if he is going back, Moses, I mean, could Moses be going back to Genesis chapter 3 and the fact that Satan was in the form of a serpent, or was possessing a serpent in Genesis chapter 3, and that's how the fall began. Uh, or that's when the fall happened. I think that's interesting. I think that could be an interesting point to look at. Um, However, knowing that Moses grew up in Egypt, I'm not sure exactly if you can make that connection with the serpent in Genesis chapter 3, with the serpent here in Exodus chapter 4. but it is interesting to think about, for sure. However, though, I love the way that this is written. So in verse 4, you have the command to put out his hand and catch it by the tail, and then the action. So he put out his hand and caught it and became a staff in his hand. But then you go back to discussion or conversation between God and Moses, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. So it's basically saying, look, if I can do this, which is turning a staff into a serpent, then you should absolutely believe in who I am and trust in me as well and depend on me. Especially knowing with all the just the back and forth that goes on between God and Moses and Pharaoh during the time of the 10 plagues that we're going to take a look at later on. So I think that is really interesting that that God is starting to try to build this trust between him and Moses. And I think that's really, really interesting to see, even though, of course, Moses is trying to get, okay, how do I tell the people that you are who you say you are? I think it's a great reminder for Moses that God is who he says he is. And let's be honest, you and I we definitely need to remind ourselves of that. Yes, we may not throw down a walking stick or or a staff and it'll turn into a serpent, but I would say constantly, we need to be in the word and reminding ourselves that God is dependable, that he is trustworthy, and that he is good. I think that's something that we could take from here with this first sign. But then God follows it up, not just with one sign, but two. Verse 6. Again, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. And he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then God said, put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put out his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. All right, let's pause there. So why use this as the second sign? First, it's remarkable, just like the first one, where it's not like a sleight of hand. No pun intended, but it's not like a sleight of hand, like a magic trick. It's literally you put your hand in the robe and basically instantaneously take it out, and it is just completely disease ridden. And leprosy at that point, it was just a societal just death, basically. You were ostracized the moment that you were found to be with leprosy. And so for Moses, he would have been thrown out of the camp that he was staying with, which, going back to Exodus chapter 3, which was the family of his father-in-law, Jethro. They most likely would have absolutely thrown him out of the camp. He may have even been separated from his family as well, his wife and his children. So I think that's the stakes that are there with the hand being leprous. But then, of course, it doesn't end there. You put it right back in, take it back out, and it's completely healed. So it is a remarkable sign. But then God follows it up with more about how about how the Lord can be trusted. Verse 8. If they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. And the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. All right, this is really interesting. because one of the plagues, of course, is turning the Nile River into blood. So you're basically seeing a preview of this and a foreshadowing. It's not like God does this one time with Moses and then he will then switch it up. No, he is showing like, hey, this is what is coming upon Egypt. Now, does Moses know that? No, but it's interesting to see that we get a little foreshadowing there. I think that's interesting to see for sure. But now, so you have the two signs. You have just this reassurance from God that he can be trusted, that he is who he says he is, and yet Moses makes excuses. Verse 10. But Moses said to the Lord, "Oh my Lord, I am not eloquent. Ooh. Maybe I'm not eloquent. Either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." But he said, being Moses, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." So he tries to give the excuse that he is not a good orator. He's not a good communicator. He's not, he's not a public speaker. And so how could he lead? Well, we have seen a lot throughout history that leaders don't have to be these grandiose speakers. Don't get me wrong, being a public speaker can be absolutely helpful in leadership, but it's not an all in. And or was it? It's an all be all. But basically, you don't have to be a great speaker to be a great leader. And yet, that's kind of the way that Moses feels here. Now, does he actually believe that, or is he trying to use that as an excuse? I would probably say more excuse because of verse 13, but he said, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." It's not that he actually believes that because he can't speak, he can't lead. I think it's literally he just doesn't want to do it. He just wants to make an excuse. And the Lord responds with questions, rhetorical questions of that as well. Who has made man's mouth? God. Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? God. Is it not I, the Lord? And so the Lord is in control of every single thing that is going on. That's what we talk about when we're saying the sovereignty of God. And so then he gives them a charge. Now, therefore, go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. So not only is God giving him the trust to go, that he is who he says he is, but he's now solving the quote unquote issue that Moses has with Moses not being a great speaker. But again, he tries to make an excuse, say, "I don't want to." And then this is a really interesting response that I want to talk about. And that's verse 14. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron your brother the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand this staff, with which you shall do the signs." All right, so the reason why I think there's a couple things interesting in this section here as we wrap up. First, verse 14, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. That is not a sinful anger. That is a righteous anger. Now, how do I know that? Well, first, first it's God, and he is perfect, so therefore that's the end of the argument. But let's take it a little bit step further from there. there is no harshness here. There's no, when it comes to hatred or when it comes to maliciousness, that's not shown here. It's more like a parent that gets annoyed at their child when they have asked them something to do. Now, don't get me wrong, that could still be taken to an extreme and not in a good way. But here it's this righteous anger of God has asked and told Moses to do something, and Moses keeps coming up with excuses, even though God shows him, hey, I am who I say I am in chapter 3. And then he comes up with the solutions for those excuses here in the first part of chapter 4. And yet, he just wants to keep trying to get out of it. And so God says, fine. Like, it's almost like that. And I think that's interesting to see. The other thing that's really interesting as well is the fact that he has already raised up Aaron to help Moses with the work. And then finally, a lot of people sometimes get tripped up by this. When God is saying to Moses that Moses, is going to be like God to him being Aaron, it doesn't mean that Moses becomes like a demigod or like divine. It doesn't mean that at all. It's just showing that Moses, as the leader, as the prophet, he is the one who's speaking the words of God, that the Lord is speaking through Moses, which then is relayed to Aaron, which then is relayed to everyone else. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that Moses becomes divine or like a demigod. It doesn't mean that at all. And so I just wanted to make sure that that is clear. But you have this command that is now been given to Moses. And at the end of chapter 4, he finally starts to make his way to Egypt. Finally. And again, we will get to the hardening of the heart with Pharaoh in at a later point. But I did want to just go ahead and mention these few verses here in chapter 4, verses 21 through 23. And the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. And I say to you, let my son go that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son. So this is just, again, a foreshadowing. When God says to Moses, hey, if these two signs don't work in front of the Israelites, there is a third sign, which is pour a little bit of water from the Nile out, and it will become blood. But here we have, so that's a foreshadowing of one of the plagues, and then another one here with the death of the firstborn, and specifically Pharaoh's firstborn as well. But I think that is interesting to keep in mind because, again, it's just showing that the plagues were not just a random thought. No, it is a very much planned plan and event that God has in store for Egypt, but also for Israel to observe as well. And so just wanted to make that note. But again, when it comes to the hardness of heart, we will get there. We will talk about that, but just not quite yet. So with that being said, thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today. Next time we will continue to set up the plagues and with a little bit of a confrontation between Moses and Pharaoh. So we will get to that on Thursday. Thanks.